Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Sunday Summary, the very first episode. What I'm trying to do here in this little video is talk about basic thoughts that happened through the homily, basic summary of the Sunday here at Good Shepherd Parish in Shawnee, Kansas. My first time doing this, and people have sometimes asked me if I ever shared my homilies, if I had recordings of them, and I've always hesitated to do them. I think there's always something better about the presentation of a homily live. And so I thought about that, and I thought maybe I could just do kind of a summary of the points. About a decade ago, I did record a few of my homilies, and it just took a lot of work, and it always felt so awkward about trying to present it on a screen or on a recording system when it's meant for interaction with the crowd, with the congregation that is there. And so it just didn't feel right, didn't work right. So I thought I'd try something different, and this is called a Sunday summary, where hopefully, if it works, each Sunday I will kind of sit down and review the major points for the homily. The thought is that if you were at Mass and you can kind of review the points, some of our people also do the children's Liturgy of the Word, and so they miss the Liturgy of the Word and they miss the homily, and so maybe some of the points that were made might be helpful for them. Or if you wanted to think about those thoughts later on during the day, it's also probably going to help me, theoretically, that I can look back on my homilies from 3 years ago. Like, what did I talk about 3 years ago? And I can look back on these videos, in theory, and try not to repeat myself too much from where I was. So that's kind of the idea. So, kind of a Sunday summary. And no, just in case you were curious, this does not cover your Sunday obligation. So, but it's kind of a summary of the thoughts from the homily and some of the announcements. So that'll be kind of a two-part thing. So this Sunday was the fourth Sunday of Lent, year C. We did the C option reading, so we didn't do the A option reading because we didn't have anyone that was going to be going through the scrutinies. So we got to hear that famous parable about the prodigal son, that probably the most famous of all of the parables that Jesus shared. And I kind of shared my basic point that I often talk about when talking about the prodigal son story. And I use some images. I use some talking about the movies that I really enjoy. I talked about movies. I talked about The Island, which I really like, that came out in 2005. These movies with twists. Sixth Sense is another famous one. I don't think I'd mentioned it in the Mass, but Prestige is another one. The one about the magicians. There's these twists that take you along, and you think you're listening to one thing, and then it turns out you're listening to something else. You're watching something else. I really like those twists. Or Frozen. I talked about Frozen, right? That has a twist that you just didn't see coming, and then you have to kind of watch the whole movie from a different perspective. And that's what I shared today about the parable of the prodigal son, that I really believe that it is very much a parable about the older son, and it's kind of a twist that happens in the story. The story goes along, you hear the story of the prodigal son, all these things, and he comes home, the father welcomes him home, happy ending, the end. And then you hear the story of the older son. Now, one of the reasons I say it's really about the older son is because this parable is addressed to the Pharisees and the scribes, who would have seen themselves as the good, faithful, law-abiding folk of the time, and they were the ones that were obeying the laws. And I wonder if Jesus, as he tells this parable, he kind of drives in the point of how far this prodigal had gone, and all those details that he says are really to kind of get under the skin of the righteousness of the Pharisees and the scribes. All the talk about disobeying your father and spending time with a swineherd and eating the pods, wanting to eat the pods that the pigs fell in. So that was kind of the summary of what I talked about, and how we are encouraged to consider, are we like that older son? How do we feel when God is merciful to the others, and are we welcoming to that? Do we welcome people as a community or not? The Now, it's also possible that people need to hear the message of the prodigal son. It's so beautiful. I talked about how Jesus is a masterful storyteller, and it's so beautiful. You can reflect upon the prodigal son, you can reflect upon the father, and you can reflect upon the older son. And so, if the message you need to hear, if you are seeing this video for whatever reason, you are far away from God and you feel like you cannot be forgiven, hear that message of the prodigal. God is merciful. God is loving. God wants to welcome you back. No questions asked. He says, "Come to me, and rejoice." And He wants us to be found. He comes looking for us. So if that's the message that you need to hear, then hear that message. God is loving. God is merciful. That's kind of a basic summary of what I talked about today. Mostly, again, reflecting on the older son. Um, Now I'll put in a little plug. It's kind of a little bit of a thing that I get on because I've talked about the older son for years. I wrote a song actually about that. It's called "The Older," and you can find that. Maybe I can provide a link down below or something. Yeah, sure, it's a little bit of self promotion, but you can hear it for free on YouTube. You can hear it for free on Spotify. But if you want to hear kind of a musical adaptation of the older son, I wrote a song from the perspective of the older son. It's free, you can hear it, and so it's kind of self promotion, but not really. I mean, enjoy. So I think I get like I don't know, an 800th of a cent or something if you listen to it on Spotify. But I'd just like you to hear the song if you have any interest. So there is that. I might provide a link for that below. So very passionate about making sure we hear the story of the older son. So that's kind of a summary of what I talked about today during the homily. So hopefully you find that interesting. And if nothing else, I can remind myself in 3 years what I talked about. So what else happened at Mass? We had some announcements, and just a reminder that we have the fish fry that's coming up. I've really enjoyed. Hey, Knights, you're doing a great job. I'm really enjoying the fish fries. Good fish. I hear great reports from others. People come from other parishes to have our fish. So if you're listening from wherever, come to the fish fry. It's this Friday, 5 to 7, every Friday during Lent. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing the presentation on super and spirituality. I'm talking about beginning to pray. It's the dinner is at 6:30, and then the presentation is at 7. It's a little under an hour presentation. It'll be there in the social hall, and so you're all welcome to do that. Sister Shar White was supposed to present, but I had a confusion in the schedule, so I'm on for this Monday. Don't forget, we have opportunities for reconciliation. This Tuesday, we will be doing our second Tuesday night live. Michael Sheeran will be joining me, as he's going to be joining me each Tuesday evening. And who knows, we might have some other special guests. But the theme that we're going to talk about is the theme of reconciliation. We have our reconciliation service on April 9th. That's in 2 Tuesdays from now. And so I thought maybe we can talk about how do you go to confession? Why do we go to confession? How does it even work? Some people have been afraid of that. And I just thought we'd talk about it. Tuesday Night Live goes live about 8:30-ish. And the idea is you can write in with questions that you might have about it while we are live. So that's Tuesday Night Live. That's this Tuesday. So I think that's pretty much it for the Sunday Summary episode 1. Feel free to comment below. I'm trying to keep this real low tech. I don't need to be spending a whole lot of time in the editing room and making fancy things. I could have put up displays about the movies I talked about, but you can Google those things if you would like. But I don't have time to sit in the editing room and make fancy videos. So I'm just doing kind of a sit down summary. This is what we're doing. And if you find this helpful, great. Just trying to get the word out and evangelize. So have a beautiful Sunday and happy April. Hey, this is my calendar that my family makes me each year. My brother-in-law makes me. This is March. And so March is about to pass us by, and no fooling. Easter isn't tomorrow. April is tomorrow, but Easter was on April 1st last year. No fooling. So anyway, have a beautiful Sunday, and I'll see you around.